As I laid there in pain and in a medicated state, I made peace with everything in my life. I was scared, but calm. If I was going to buy the farm, then it was time to get my ticket punched by the man upstairs. It was out of my hands. I knew no matter what, life would go on. Those are the words of Wildflower himself, my good friend Hugh Law. Hugh, welcome to episode 1. Episode 1. I'm Sergeant 12XU, and today we are doing a deep dive. Some of you may know that this is a new studio, something a little different than my typical overland adventures, but that's okay. Changes in the wind, and we're adapting and overcoming. Today, things are going to get a little deep with my friend Hugh here. Hugh, welcome to episode 1 of Deep Dive, and I just want to say thanks for coming over. I appreciate it. I know that we've talked about this for a while now, and here we are.
Yeah.
So for those of you out there that are wondering a little bit about Hugh, like myself, he's former law enforcement. Hugh has a very interesting story in that it's going to be kind of the rise and fall of Hugh, so to speak.
Of humanity.
The resurrection, if you will, of Hugh, which is a good thing. So with that, let's get into it. Let's start from your childhood. So let's just start with, let's talk about Vietnam a little bit.
Yeah. Born in Vietnam, born 2 years after the fall of Saigon in 1975. I have a younger sister. She was born in 1979. My parents, they were doing okay under the new regime, but they wanted a future for my sister and I, so they made the decision to leave family, friends behind and literally get on a boat and see where they were going to go. If they were lucky, they'll get picked up by a ship and get taken away from Vietnam. If they were unlucky, they would they would be consumed by the ocean. So, yeah.
So right out of the get-go, you're basically a fucking Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Right out of the get-go.
Yeah. There's no there's no A, B, C, and D. You don't have like contingency plans. The plan is to get out of Vietnam. Whatever happens, happens. So, yeah.
So obviously your family makes it.
Yes.
Where do you settle in the United States?
We settled in San Jose, California. So at the time, my mom's brother-in-law was already here in California, in San Jose. He was going to DLI, and when the fall happened, he was stuck here. So.
Okay.
This was like in 1981, I believe.
All right. So you're in San Jose.
Yes.
Your family relocates after kind of a treacherous journey from Vietnam at
Yes.
a really bad time, frankly. But you guys are survivors, and you make it to San Jose. So you're here in Northern California. Where do you go to school?
I went to several schools. We moved around a lot. So, gosh, a couple of them don't exist anymore. I want to say Berryessa School, and then Hester School, which is over in the Rose Garden area. And then from there we moved to the west side of town, and I went to holy shnikes, Eisenhower, not too far from here in Santa Clara. Yeah, from Eisenhower I went to a middle school, Castro, and then Prospect, then the junior college circuit scene, and then to San Jose State.
Okay. So how was life growing up in the Bay Area?
At that time, there weren't too many Vietnamese people. There were only like a handful of people, because for my family, we were the tail end of the first wave of boat people that came over to the States. So we were trying to compete with other groups in San Jose, and there was maybe in one hand a handful of like Vietnamese business, both grocery stores and like eateries and whatnot.
So what do you do when you graduate high school? Then what?
After high school, I wanted to go in the service, but my folks were just like, no. My dad, he's like coming from being a soldier, having seen war, experienced war. He was like, nope, you're not going to go into the military. So went to junior college. And
which one did you go to?
West Valley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I went to De Anza,
Yeah.
and I went to Mission. Mission, I think, is the sister to West Valley.
Yeah, it is. It is a sister.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What'd you study there?
I started with administration of justice because I always wanted to go.
Why did you do that?
I know. It's literally the black hole. If you want to bury yourself in the whole rigmarole of like junior colleges, that's something you do. Is you pick a major and then you focus on that. And that was a big mistake for me because I was the first kid in my immediate family to go off to university. Granted, it was only a junior college, but I didn't know. I just kind of like followed the trail with my other mates, and also West Valley College was ranked number 3 in Playboy for like the hottest gals. So it's just natural. So
there's always that, I guess.
Yeah,
I did
it's called
not
motivation.
Know that. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Good
so this
knowledge.
was
good knowledge.
95 or so.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went to West Valley College, kind of bounced around, was put on academic probation like 3 or 4 times, was threatened to be kicked out of school, and unless I buckled down, kind of rebelled against the system at home a little bit too.
So who were you living with at home at that time?
My parents and my sister. My sister had graduated from high school by that time, and then she was off to be a Bronco. So she was, she went to a 4-year college right out of the gate.
So, so you're young, you're in school, you're
Yes.
doing the JC thing at West Valley.
Yes.
You're doing administration of justice, God knows why.
I know.
What comes of that? Like, how does that segue into the next step in your life?
The next step in my life was I bounced around a lot, and then I got introduced into sports medicine because at the time I was doing MMA type training. There was this thing called the Ultimate Fighting Championship, which later evolved to the UFC because when you write Ultimate Fighting Championship, it takes up a lot of blocks, so they just went 3 letters. So I got injured a lot, and I wanted to learn how to treat myself. The whole self-care bit.
Yeah.
And there was a sports medicine program at the junior college. I enrolled in that, succeeded. I really liked what I was doing, then refocused myself onto that path. Along the way, I got in, I met a gal and kind of got sidetracked a little bit, failed anatomy 3 times, studying of different anatomy.
Time out.
Yeah.
I met a gal and failed anatomy.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I'll just say that.
Okay, was this a local girl from the Bay Area?
It was a gal from the college. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you find love or interest there.
Yeah.
But
interest.
But you're young and you have a future.
Yes.
So one foot in front of the other, you carry on.
Yeah.
So what's next for Hugh?
So I transferred to San Jose State, commuter school, focused on just all I wanted to do was just get that piece of paper so that I could go on to the next venture in my life was go into the military service. Because that was what I wanted to do, was go in the military service.
But your dad wasn't down with that.
He was actually down with that because
he was.
Yeah, because now he's like, hey, you know what? You can go in as an officer. You have a college degree, because if that doesn't pan out, you're an educated person. You have an education. So I was like, okay, sweet. And that's what I did. And the recruiter was just, I was going to go into the officer side of the house, and they were just, the recruiter wasn't big on that. So,
it's having gone through recruiters myself, it's kind of a roll of the fucking dice, frankly.
yeah.
So when I was 18, I was a senior in high school. We used to have career day, and this was in Hawaii. And literally, they were landing Huey helicopters in our football field. No shit.
That's a good recruitment tool.
Yeah. So pretty cool, right? You see
Yeah.
Hueys from the sky, you're like, oh shit. So anyway, an Army guy tells me, hey, you should take the ASVAB test. And I'm thinking, well, what the fuck is the ASVAB test? I don't know what that is. He's like, oh, you got to take that before you get into the service. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll take it. So I took it, and I scored pretty well. And I meet with him in his office. And this is what this guy tells me, right? Army recruiter. You would think he'd be overjoyed to enlist me in his armed force, right?
Right.
What does he tell me? He goes, hey, man, good job on the ASVAB. You kicked ass on that. You got like a 91 or whatever it was. He's like, yeah, we can't help you. I'm like, what do you mean you can't help us? He's like, yeah, you see that door down there? Go talk to the Air Force. Go be a pilot. Yeah, you're wasting your time with us. Right. I looked at this guy and I'm thinking, wait a second, you're the one that got me to take this test.
Right. Now
I'm here because of you.
Yeah.
And you just told me to go talk to the Air Force guy. I don't give a fuck about the Air Force guy.
Right.
I came to the dance with you.
Mm-hmm.
So that turned me off early on. And basically I just walked out of there because I wasn't really committed anyway. And I didn't realize it until probably 3 years later when I went to the Marine Corps recruiter. And then I walked in there and I was a man of conviction at that point, and things were different. When I was 18, I was kind of just, whatever.
Blown in the wind type of deal.
But at 21, I was focused. And at 21, I was ready to sign the line. So different mindset, different time, but I know how it is. Sometimes recruiters can be hit or miss, frankly. Yeah. It depends on what their motivations are. It depends on what the armed force is, what the MOS is, all that kind of stuff. So frankly, I'm not surprised to hear what you're telling me.
Yeah, I mean, the different recruiters, I was looking at Army and Navy, and they both, what I wanted to do was literally jump out of planes, shoot guns, blow things up. And they said, no, because of my background in sports medicine, they said, oh, yeah, I think you're better in a clinical setting. So I don't want to be in a clinical setting. I want to be out there in the field. I don't want to be put in four walls, And they said, nope. So I was him-hawing that. And then a family friend of ours who was a sergeant at San Jose PD said, hey, put your name into the hat. We're looking for people. I was a cadet years ago prior to being, when I was in high school, kind of like the Explorer program. So I said, sure, why not? So that was in September 2001, pre 9/11.
Not by much.
Yeah, not by much. I did the physical a couple of weeks, maybe 2 weeks or a week after 9/11 for San Jose PD. And then past that, and then I was waiting to do another exam, and then Officer Jeffrey Fontana gets killed. And he was a new rookie officer. He had just passed field training program, and he was a solo cholo working midnights in the Almaden Valley. He makes a car stop, gets killed, gets murdered in
Was that the one where they were clicking the radio?
Yeah.
And to answer up, and then somebody clicked for him, but then, or something like that, where they were doing roll call, and then they called him, and then somebody clicked, but
I believe so.
But he was already dead in the street at that point, or something like that? Okay.
Yeah, there was a gunshot. It was a,
I do remember that. Okay.
Yeah, so that happens, and of course the family goes, whoa, what are you doing? And a lot of my mates were just like, hey, why do you go in that field? And I said, I felt as it was a calling.
Okay.
The things that I did growing up as a child, playing guns, doing martial arts, doing jiu-jitsu, everything, it was preparing me for a lifetime of service. And it sounds weird to be at that age to say that, but yeah, I've never envisioned myself working within four walls and a roof, and I think I would just go mental if I had to do that. So I went down, and it was a long process, and that was in October 2011, and then I graduated December 2001. October 2001. Graduated December 2001. Didn't even care to walk. And then July, the day after my birthday, I started the academy. It was July 2002. Yeah, so July 2002, successfully passed that program and was operational on the streets in December 2002. And that was a trip, right before Christmas, December 20th, 2002.
So having gone through the same journey myself, talk to me a little bit about what it feels when you're a new guy and you get your badge pinned on you and you're solo on patrol.
It's a cool feeling. So my first gig being solo, I was on a team with semi-junior guys that I think I had like maybe 5, 6, 7 years on at the time. I experienced my first, I wasn't involved in it, but it was an officer-involved shooting that stemmed from a vehicle stop that became a pursuit, and it was a trip. And when all things got settled, we set up a perimeter. I was on this perimeter. I was the only dude watching this side of the perimeter. And a K-9 sergeant, I think it was a K-9 sergeant, comes walking around. He's running the perimeter, making sure, assessing the perimeter, seeing shore up where you need to. He runs up to me and he starts like just talking to me and introduces himself. I introduced myself. I was, kind of excited. I was like, yeah, here we go. I'm in it.
Hard charger.
Yeah, and I got my shotgun out. I'm all, and it's funny because he looks over me just calmly. He goes, you got that area, right? I'm all, Roger that, sir. And he goes, so if the guy comes out and he follows our shooting policy, you know what to do, right? And I said, Roger that. And that was like the reality check for me, like, hey, it's not just going one direction. It could possibly go the other direction. And then right then and there, strangely, the thought of Officer Fontana comes in my mind, like, he was solo cholo several weeks after graduating from the FTO program. He was on his own. He gets killed. And that was like a reality set in for me at that moment. A little bit
of fucking gut check, huh?
Yeah, it was a gut check. It's like, hey, dude, guess what? There's no timeout. This is not like in the academy. No. This is not a role playing. Things that are coming out.
We're playing for keeps out here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it became a barricade situation. The SWAT teams landed, took over my position, and I was out there for a long amount of time, and I was cold. I was thirsty, and I just thought to myself, you know what? I am so ill prepared for this. And I knew after that moment, I told myself, after tonight, when I get through this is not going to happen again. And we got through it. The guy, they made entry, took him into custody. But that following weekend, I hit up like all the like squared away guys that I looked up to. And like, hey, what's in your kit? And then that became a journey of throughout my career on how to have better pieces of kit than what the rubbish that was issued to us. And what I had to do to make either I was going to make it or I was going to find it and get it for myself, or I was going to make it. And that kind of like started down a different path. But yeah.
And we'll get to that later. We'll talk about Windy Hill Stitch Works a little bit later.
Yeah.
A little foreshadowing there. Okay, so you're a new guy. You're at San Jose PD.
Yes.
You're liking what you're doing.
Yes.
You're on patrol.
I'm getting paid to do this. I'm getting paid to drive fast.
You're getting
carry a
paid to do
gun.
it.
Yeah.
So your career is progressing,
Yes.
right? Things are going well. You've been there for a few years. The years are starting to pile on. You're starting to have aspirations of promotion. You're starting to have aspirations of maybe specialty assignments, things above and beyond normal. And your mindset at that time is, this is a career.
Right.
Like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my fucking life
Right.
until I retire. And then I'm going to pension out and everything's good.
Yeah.
So that's your mindset, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, I will say that when I entered the career, and this is the thing about law enforcement, or a career where you can seriously, well, with a career where it can end not in a good way. After that night on that court, I made peace with the fact that I'm going to do this job. I love this job. I'm going to do this job. And there's two ways out. You either retire as an old person, or you
end up in a pine box.
Yeah. So I made peace with that path that night. And yeah, so it's different, you know.
So fast forward, and you're well into your career, and you've had some scrapes, you've had some fights on the street, as we all have, people resisting, whatnot. Injuries are really common in law enforcement. I've certainly been injured quite a bit in law enforcement. Let's talk about knee injuries.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah. Got a couple of knee injuries. Yeah, it's horrible. But it's common because of just the kit that we wear, the vehicle, the task we're going to do. We don't get to stretch out before we get in a foot pursuit, or someone decides to be a rabbit and play hide and seek with us, you know. So I had a couple of knee injuries. The most substantial knee injury I had was with, I got in a fight with one of my buddies with a suspect who was high on, I think, PCP and methamphetamine. During that fight, I had torn my meniscus. And in that fight was also one of my buddies, Mike Catherman. His nickname is Catman. And that was on my birthday in 2012. And yeah, so I had just returned back to San Jose, and was working on a team when I got in that fight. And because I was still on probation, I didn't take time off, although my physician was like, dude, you got to get that thing sorted. So no, I got to write out this whole probationary period. So like a lot of things, I gutted that, pushed through.
Because that's what we do.
Yeah. And then October 6th or 7th or something like that, in 2012, a couple months later, I got into my injury that took me off the streets. I had torn my my bicep, my left bicep, in a fight. And that October 2012 was the last time I wore an actual police uniform, put on the kit belt and everything. Yeah.
Little did you know that would be the last time you would be 10-8, strapped on in uniform.
Yep. Yeah.
But we're not there yet. So you go out on injury.
Yes.
Because of a knee injury and bicep injury, you've got these problems, right? So you're out, you're doing the workers' compensation thing. You're dealing with the city, you're dealing with workers' comp. And you spent about close to 2 years out,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So you come back after 2 years. Let's just pick up the story there.
So home life during those 2 years, because my ex wasn't working, I wasn't working. The issues that we had as a couple, where I was working and she was at home, you know, there's that time. So there's that break.
Mm-hmm.
So for X amount of hours of the day, I wasn't home. She could do her own thing. And then the 3 days off, we had to function as a couple. But sometimes the 3 days became 1 day, sometimes it became 2 days because of different assignments, court, training, extra other commitments. But the consolidated time together, a lot of the cracks became like full on, like missing pieces out of a dam. So
virtual Grand Canyon, if you will.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah, it became really deep. And yeah, so it was interesting. She was my ex was my first love. And she was definitely a more seasoned in the relationship realm than I was. And so I had a lot of growing up to do. And and I will tell you that I wasn't mature.
Let's take a time out there for a second. So when you say that, what do you mean by that? Was she more emotionally mature or more experienced in relationships, or like characterize that for a second?
She was more experienced in relationships.
Okay.
For me, it's funny and it's kind of embarrassing to say this, but my parents were, especially my mom, she was always like, it's like, you're not going to have a girlfriend. You're not going to have a girlfriend until you're in college or when you have a job. It's like, okay, whatever. So, whenever a parent says that, what do you do as a child? You just kind of bypass and you go do your own thing behind, sneak around. But when I met Marie, I was just like, holy cow, dude, this is awesome. She was very edgy. She had ink, piercings, smoker, drinker, all the things that for my mom, she was like, what the hell? Do you not like me? Do you not love your mom? But, I loved her. I first love, it's the puppy dog feeling. And yeah, so there's a saying, love conquers all, but I think for me, my experience, love hides a lot. And especially in my relationship with her and being immature for relationships, I didn't know how to handle a lot of things. And I would just tell myself, oh, you know what, she'll change. But, a zebra doesn't change its stripes. Or there's a saying like that. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was rough. It came to our breakup was very explosive. Law enforcement was involved and just legal proceedings and whatnot. And that was in 2014, and then everything was complete by 2015. Some exchanges were made between her and I, and we did the whole counseling thing. And yeah, so it was pretty gnarly, the whole experience.
All right. So you talked about Marie.
Yes.
And you talked about how you were kind of going through things, and obviously the love that you had for her had a tremendous impact on you.
Yes.
But ultimately, like a lot of things in life, it wasn't meant to be, and it didn't work out.
Right.
All right.
But I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
That's usually the story,
yeah.
Right?
I didn't get that memo. It's like,
yeah.
What?
So things don't work out with Marie.
Right.
And
she goes back home flies back to New Zealand the day after our last fight, where it got legal. So, yeah.
We'll talk about New Zealand a little bit later, because you do have a very profound interest in the country of New Zealand, and you've been there. You've been there many times, and you certainly appreciate the culture there.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move forward a little bit. And in your law enforcement career, post Marie, what happens next? What's the next life-changing incident for you?
So the next So this was 2015. I had 2 bicep surgeries. So going back, there was a delay in treatment for my bicep surgery. So the first one was almost a year, close to a year since I injured it. So I injured it in October 2012. I did not get approval for surgery until August 2013. So it had been 10 months. And by that time, my arm had a lot of issues. So I go get surgery. It doesn't get any better. And so with that in my mind, and then home life sucking, it was like I was trying to juggle 2 flames at the same time. I would address the home situation, but then the work situation with my arm, and I was doing everything that I could to just get myself back into doing the job. And that's the thing, with law enforcement. I really enjoyed what I did for a living. And I would do anything that I could, cheat a medical exam and say, hey, everything's honky-dory, so I can go back. Or bypass physical therapy to go back because I enjoyed what I did. So I pushed myself maybe a little bit too hard, and it wasn't healing at the way it was healing. So I was at this weird junction in my life where my home life was shitty. I didn't know if I had a career, to come back to. And that just compounded into everything in my life, just circling the drain. I break up with Marie, or Marie breaks up with me, depending on who you ask, and then that's gone. That one part of my life is gone. And then here goes another part that may be gone. So I was in a pretty bad place. But I sorted myself out, went back to counseling, saw my relationship therapy guy, Marv, and kind of rebuilt myself at that stage in 2014. And then finally get approved to do knee surgery on my left knee in 2015. Prior to that, they found a growth in my throat, and they thought it could have been cancerous. So I had throat surgery. So that was interesting too. I remember for that one, I wrote a letter to Marie, and I said to her, hey, going to get throat surgery or something like that. And told her I loved her, because I mean, it's been 6-7 years. I still love the girl. And she'll always be a part of my life, but you know what? She opted out of that. But I emailed her and kind of told her what was happening, told her I loved her, and that was that. Had the throat surgery. It wasn't anything dangerous. Was recovering from that and getting ready to get knee surgery for my left knee, the one that's been the most jacked up. And I remember I was sitting down that night, and I'd just been able to eat solid foods again. I was about to eat some fried chicken, and I get a text, and it said, hey, there was an officer-involved shooting at San Jose. And then I asked who, and it was Officer Mike Johnson. I knew Mike. He was a couple academy classes ahead of me. He was in Jeff Fontana's class. That's how that class is. There's always when something tragic happens, there's going to be everyone that's around that class is going to be kind of associated with that. So Mike was in that class. I knew Mike. We went to a couple of shooting schools together, and I know he was a very squared away shooter. He shot competitively on his off time, and he was also a martial artist. So there was that bond. We worked. He was a midnighter. I was a swing shifter. His team would often relieve my team. He was a nice guy. We didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things professionally, like SOP wise, but we were cordial to each other. But when I heard he was shot, and then later I get another text from another guy who was there. He tells me that he's dead. That was just like, holy crap. And then turned on the news, and the news just like they were running with that story. So that sucked.
Yeah. For me, I remember when MJ was killed. Anytime a law enforcement officer in the Bay Area is killed, all of us know about it. I do remember hearing the specifics of how he died, responding to a 5150 subject with a high-powered rifle, which they didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read for the viewers here, I'm going to read an excerpt from something that you mentioned, Marv, earlier.
Right.
You had written an email, or if you will, a letter to Marv, sort of getting him up to speed as to what had been going on with you. But to me, I sort of interpret it as more of almost like a diary or a journal of like sort of a way for you to commit, pen to paper as a release of sorts. Even though this is sent to Marv, I think this was written in December of 2017?
Yeah.
This is probably very therapeutic for you.
Yes.
So we're talking about Mike Johnson right now and his death in the line of duty. So I'm going to read something that you wrote to Marv talking about MJ's death. All right, so here we go. A few weeks after my surgery, I was prepping for my next surgery. 3 years later, the city finally approved surgery for my left knee. The final procedure so I could return to work. A week before the surgery, my workmate was killed on duty responding to a man with a weapon call. Officer Michael Johnson, otherwise known as MJ, was shot and killed by the mentally disturbed man armed with a rifle. I knew MJ. He was my midnight counterpart. Although we didn't see eye to eye on things, he was a solid shooter and could handle himself. So I was in shock with his death. MJ's death was tough, and I reflected on my life and my own mortality. I returned back to the department 2 days after MJ's death. I had not set foot in the department after being away for 2 years. Wow.
Yeah.
So here you are. You're gone for nearly 2 years. You've got all these injuries going on. You hear about Mike getting killed, and now all of a sudden you come back and you're like a stranger in a strange land in your own damn department, and the department is grieving.
Yes.
And mourning his death. It was, squared away guy. Fortunately, he didn't feel any pain. But still, violent death right in the line of duty. Okay, so you didn't get to go to MJ's funeral.
Yeah.
And why was that?
My knee surgery was scheduled on that day. It was a tough decision to make. And again, looking back at it from my view now, the emotional aspect of it was he's a teammate, was killed in the line of duty. You need to go to that. But the macro aspect of it is I can't continue doing what I do without getting myself sorted out with my knee.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to take the emotion out of it, and I made that decision to get the knee surgery. And I went that day, got knee surgery. Couple of the nurses that worked at the hospital or the surgery center, their husbands were SFPD officers. So their husbands were at the service.
Okay.
And they were telling me, they're asking me if I knew MJ, and I said, yeah. And they were like, oh, I'm sorry for your loss. But I remember after the surgery, I was at my parents' house, and I was on crutches, went out of the kitchen to grab something, and then the service was still on. And that was sad. But I was also kind of pretty heavily medicated on painkillers. But I remember seeing the service, and I just kind of turned, hobbled back into the other room, and just kind of, I think I passed out or something like that from the meds. But yeah, that was rough. And then a few months after that, I adopted a dog, my middle Malinois. That was also a life-changing event for me. She put me back on a schedule in my life. It was no longer, as I describe it, a pity party, where I was like the special guest. So I had to focus on her, be on a schedule, be a productive adult, and take care of her and train her, rear her, so she's a good, productive canine in society.
And so for those that don't know, so a Belgian Malinois is like a high energy animal.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So typically in law enforcement,
on and off.
In a canine unit, now granted this was your personal dog,
Yes.
but I just want to let those that don't know these dogs know. So working dogs in law enforcement, typically you're going to have Belgian Malinois or German Shepherds.
Mm-hmm.
So a Belgian Malinois is a high energy, high drive animal.
Yes.
So that animal can't just sit at home and twiddle its paws.
No.
You've got to get that thing outside. It
Yes.
needs to run. It needs to be physically active. So you're in a recovery phase. You get Darby, this Malinois,
Yeah.
and for you, it's almost like, wow, okay, the dog, in a way, brought structure to your life because, I've got to walk it, I've got to feed it, I've got to give it love and nurturing, all these things that you need to do. It's like your child. You cannot neglect a puppy like that at all. Right. So in a way, it's a blessing because it sort of rekindles you as a person. You're coming back to work post surgery. You already had, a coworker just get killed. So you've got a lot going on in your life. You had a breakup with Marie. You've got all these things going on, but this dog somehow grounds you.
Yeah.
It grounds you in reality and gets you flowing again.
Yeah.
And so now you're sort of picking up the pieces a little bit, getting back into the fight, so to speak. So you go back to work.
Yeah.
And you start work again.
Yes.
And then what happens?
So I started work again. It was beginning of September. My time had expired for being on injury time, and they called me back and said, "Hey, dude, you got to go back." I said, "Okay." So I go. I'm not full capacity because I'm still recovering. I don't know if I'm going to fully recover between all my between the bicep surgeries, knee surgeries. I was still having issues with my bicep. So I work a modified assignment. I'm not on the field, but I'm working for an investigation unit that does spend time on the field. So this is the beginning of September. I'm in the unit for roughly 6 weeks when I got injured.
Stop right there.
Yeah.
Let's go back to your letter to Marv.
Okay.
Because I want the viewers to hear it in your words, sort of what happened. Because this is the defining moment in your life, essentially, that changes the course of your future, right? It becomes a crossroads. You didn't know it at the time, but ultimately, we now know that it was a crossroads. So let's go to your letter to Marv. You wrote, everything came to a head in the afternoon on the 28th October 2015. My partner and I were in the field working on an active, high-profile robbery investigation since 8 a.m. We were returning one of the victims/witnesses in the investigation back to his workplace. He was seated in the front passenger seat, my partner was driving, and I was seated behind the victim. I remember we were stopped at the light and proceeding forward through the intersection when all of a sudden we were hit by another car from the left side. No screeching tires, nothing. Just bam! We were broadsided in the intersection at 40 miles per hour plus, no braking. The oncoming vehicle struck the rear driver's side passenger door and wheel area, causing our vehicle to spin. I felt my body twisting and getting sucked into my seat, and I remember seeing a black object coming at me from the left. I awoke to our unmarked vehicle partially blocking the intersection and the backside resting up against a light pole. My partner and passenger was still strapped in their seatbelt. I exited the vehicle and grabbed my radio and put out radio traffic about the accident and requested for medical assistance. At the time, I felt good, coherent even, but a few minutes after, police units arrived and the pain train arrived. My body was hurting, I had difficulty breathing, and my chest felt like someone smacked it, and I felt nauseous. Apparently, my favorite dress shirt was shredded from the collision, and little did I know until later, my handgun grip was cracked, and my metal handcuff key was bent into a crescent shape. Wow. So
It's a minor setback.
all of a sudden, the world just turned on a dime.
Yeah.
Right?
Little did I know.
Yeah. So having gone through this myself, and we were talking before the interview about my collision that happened 3.5 months ago, I can relate because it happened to me. Not to the severity level as you, but when I read this, a lot of stuff is going through my head because I'm almost reliving my own collision where I got hit on the left side just like you, and my patrol vehicle spun around just like you. And we both talked about how we got out dazed and confused, but we were still trying to check the boxes and accomplish small tasks and everything, even though our brains were a little scrambled.
But we're wired. I think you do the job enough, you take the job seriously enough, you're going to program yourself, I think, to function as such so that it's going to be successful, so you meet that objective at that time, and then everything else, once that's addressed, you can go, okay, cool, what's the other things that do I need to address once that's done? And I think we're very task driven and task oriented.
Absolutely. And
which is a positive and can also be very, it can also be detrimental.
So I think you find that a lot in type A personalities where people are used to, under stress, under pressure, still accomplishing the mission. And like we were talking about before the interview, after my collision, I was mentally checking off boxes. Okay, did I activate my body camera? Did I activate the dash cam? Yes, I did. Okay, so if I'm going to the hospital, I need to get my rifle out of the patrol vehicle. Okay, there's a Ticket Pro electronic citation device in there. I better make sure that gets back to the substation. All these things are going through my head. Oh, I better get my gear out of the back. Oh, gee, I better pass on to night shift. This, crazy 5150 lady that's roaming down, the street or whatever. All this stuff is going on. And meanwhile, like we talked about, I'm in shock, didn't know it. Right.
You bypass it.
I just compartmentalize that, and I'm task oriented, right? I'm in the minutia. I'm operating in the macro. I'm not seeing the 40,000 foot view, right? And my beat partners are telling me, dude, like, who gives a fuck about that? You need to go to the hospital.
Right.
We will take care of all your gear. You need to go to the hospital. we'll tow the car.
Yeah.
It's all good. Let's get you to the hospital. Okay. So let's get back to your letter to Marv. You do go to the hospital, and this is how you describe things to Marv. Back to the letter.
Okay.
From the crash, I sustained cracked ribs, a bruised sternum. I re-injured my left knee, which I just had operation on April 2015. I sustained a whiplash and later determined to have a moderate traumatic brain injury. MTBI. Following the crash, I had several debilitating episodes of migraines and psychological conditions. I had mood swings, depression, irritability. I didn't know I sustained an MTBI until I was finally authorized to see a brain injury specialist 6 weeks post-injury. The symptoms I felt made sense after the doctor explained them to me. I tried to return to a pre-MTBI life, but struggled with day-to-day activities. Doing dishes was even a challenge.
Yes.
So there you are, post-collision.
3 dishes.
You learn weeks after the fact that you've got TBI.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's coming to you, and you're starting to sort of comprehend and understand that I'm fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't just like, oh, broken pinky, oh, ripped shirt.
Yeah.
This is something different. This is something that's affecting your cognitive abilities to where you're having to retrain yourself to do simple tasks.
Yes.
Like washing dishes,
Yeah.
right?
I was overwhelmed, and I remember it to this day. I mean, there were several incidents. So I spent a night in the hospital, and that wasn't pleasant at all. Wasn't pleasant having to take a piss with a nurse next to me trying to help me. She was overly friendly and helpful, but I said I could do this myself. I've been doing it for 30-something years, So the first night home, I didn't know what time of day or what day of the week it was. I had passed out, and I woke up in the same position that I was in, and all the blinds were still open, the doors were open, and I thought to myself, that's great. My parents didn't even have the decency to fucking close the door to my house. But I had thought I had just taken a nap, but a day had gone by. And yeah, I was like, holy cow. And then a couple other incidents were the dishes. It was 3 items. It was a plate, a fork, and a cup. And I couldn't even figure out how to, 1, wash it, and 2, I was crying because I felt overwhelmed. Like I couldn't handle that. And those were some of the things that I was like, holy cow, this is not, like you said, wasn't just like a bump in the head or, a knee injury. This was affecting my overall brain, how I thought, how I functioned as a human. And yeah, so that was scary. And then to not know that and to struggle with that was challenging. I mean, I had taken a week off of work, and then I'd gone back to work. I had seen a gal that I was dating prior to the injury or prior to the crash, and we started hanging out again, and then she brought up the fact that we had actually broken up a couple of days before the crash, and I didn't know that we had broken up. She had gone on holiday, came back. I texted her out of the blue, and then she was just telling me, she's like, hey, you do know that we broke up, right? I was like, oh, we broke up?
Crazy.
Yeah,
that's
so
crazy.
That was interesting. So I guess that's when I was like, oh, shit, this is kind of serious. And
Right.
and at the same time, my supervisor was being a complete asshole, and he was demanding, like, asking me why I was milking this, when I was coming back to work, you know, whether or not I had gone to see a doctor. I mean, he's a fuckwit, the best way to describe him. I think he's still active at the organization. And he was just like being on a power trip, you know. And I responded back in a polite text, and I said, "Hey, dude," in so many words, to go fuck off. And yeah, and then finally I was able to see my physician, because he was not part of like the umbrella program, or under the same treating physicians. So I finally was able to see him, and then it was 6 weeks later, and that's when he sat me down and said, "Hey, dude, guess what? You sustained a TBI, okay? Would have been great to see you post TBI within a certain window, but since you weren't able to come in to see us, this is what we're working with. And it's going to be challenging, but you know what? We're going to be able to address this. These are the things that we need to do." And I think he came out with there's a 10 list, 10 items on the list to check off. And that was December 2015. And to this day, in 2020, there are things on there that I have not even addressed yet. And it's been a slow trickle, the treatment, which in the end resulted in me having to retire, and also not only retire, but to live with those effects of it. So, yeah. But so it's been an interesting journey since 2015.
All right. So let's go back to the letter for a second here that you wrote to Marv post-collision.
Yes.
Every day was a challenge, a roller coaster of emotions. The hardest thing I will say about head injuries is that outsiders never see it. I remember countless times hearing, quote, "You look fine," unquote. It bothered my parents to see me at times incapacitated. They couldn't see the visual injury. At times I felt having a broken extremity would be way more understanding than a head injury.
Yes.
So let's talk about the stigma with brain injuries, mental health issues, and that whole thing. So in law enforcement, we're not really good at talking with people about problems between the ears, right?
Yes.
There is a stigma with that. Whether it's like truly mental health, or like in your case, a TBI injury, which to some degree has incapacitated you, or at least affected your ability to either, think things through, cognitive issues or whatnot, or even in some cases, we saw other like secondary and tertiary impacts having to do with anxiety, depression, things like that, to where your TBI started to affect you like emotionally even, and it impacted some of your relationships with people. So earlier you talked about Marie, later we'll talk about Gina, but let's go back to, you take a trip to New Zealand.
Yes.
You go to New Zealand. You're still dealing with workers' comp, your attorney, all that kind of stuff. Eventually, you come back from New Zealand, and unfortunately, another coworker gets killed in the line of duty.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Mike.
Yeah, Catman.
Yeah.
Catman was, several academies behind mine. I joke that he saw me in various stages of clothing, because to get to his locker bay, he would walk past my locker bay, and he would see me, changing out, getting ready for work. And the dude dressed very fast. I could be, almost done, and he'll be walking past me, we'll give each other the old head nod. And the next thing I know, he's suited up. Maybe he wore the uniform underneath his street clothes. I don't know.
Fucking Superman.
Exactly.
Clark Kent, man.
Yeah. So I knew Catman from my interactions with him, and then occasionally he'll work on a team with me, or I'd work on a team with him. And we became friends after I came back. I came back to San Jose. We were on the same team in 2012, and we bonded. And then I invited him to one of my buddies' annual camping trip called a man camp. Basically, we started in 2010. This is what this cup's all about, you know.
Why don't you show that to the camera for a second there?
Yeah, so this is the cup. I don't know if it's focusing. Yeah, but it's man camp. So every man camper has a cup, and this year was the 10-year anniversary of man camp. And what we do at man camp is all the guys get a hall pass from their respective wives, and we go camping for about a week or so. We burn a lot of things. We have very elaborate and ornate fires, and we eat really well.
Huge fires.
Yeah, huge fires.
And excellent food.
Yeah,
Good
really
chow.
good food. Really good chow. And so Mike got to experience man camp, and yeah, so he became a man camper. And it was at man camp that I saw Mike in a different light. He always talked about his kids. He always talked about his wife. And the guy he was a devout Christian and a devout father, husband, and at the same time, a pretty hardcore police officer too. So to me, in my eyes, that was someone that I look up to, because there were guys that were squared away officers, but their home life was a big dumpster fire. You know, they had drinking issues, they had extramarital affairs. There was just a lot of things that was like, but because they were a good officer, that was the highlight in my eyes of their career, was just, oh, he's a great officer, he's a great dope cop, he's a great, SWAT cop and all that.
Always kind of a caveat, right? It's like,
Yeah.
we all know those guys at work that it's like, oh, this guy's good, he'll find meth on his grandma,
Yeah.
right? Or this guy can, he'll deuce the president or whatever, right?
Right.
So we talked about this before the interview. I remember hearing about Mike's death when it happened, and I didn't know that he was the same Mike from Man Camp. So it took me a while to make that connection, to understand that, fuck, that's the same guy from Man Camp.
Yeah.
Which, let's go back to your letter to Marv, and let's read what you wrote about Mike. My close friend from work was killed in an on-duty motorcycle accident. Officer Michael Catherman, known as MK, was killed during a head-on collision. He was thrown off his motorcycle and was killed on impact. MK's death devastated me. His death shook me to the core. MK was devoted to God and was a family man, happily married with 2 young boys and loved by all that knew him. Man, fuck. So this is a guy that's not only good at what he does at work, but he's the total package.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a devout Christian, a man of faith. He's a good family man. I mean, total role model.
Yeah.
He's the total package. And here he is. He gets a spot as a motors officer.
The spot that he's always wanted.
Yeah.
They even made custom pants for him because Mike's got a big ass, not gonna lie, and nobody else would fit his pants. And yeah, he was happy as a clam in that position. And to get the text from one of my other close mates, he sent me a text and he said, hey, he said, heads up, because you guys are friends. Mikey was involved in an on-duty motorcycle accident. I said, okay. Respond, okay. And then he's off en route to the hospital. And then 20 minutes later, he says, hey, Mikey's 1055, which is code for dead. And that to me is just like, it's what the fuck moment. My heart sank.
Another fucking gut punch.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't enough that Mike Johnson gets killed, shot in the face, going to a 5150, and now, on duty, motors collision, he's gone.
Yeah.
And he's a man camper.
Yeah, he's a man camper.
That you had spent some time with outside of work, got to know a little bit, and you respected him, and now he's gone.
Yeah. I had seen Mikey before my accident. We were grabbing coffee, and him and the other motorcycle guys landed at the same Starbucks. And we were all sitting out there catching up, and because he missed the prior year's man camp, and he said he was going to make up for it the following year, 2016, because we're going to have a competition for desserts. He made like the best Dutch oven cobbler.
I had heard about that from Robert and Nathan.
Yeah. From Manchild and Lord of the Flies.
Yes.
By the way, we all have names, titles that we get on our cups. So.
Wildflower.
Yeah. Wildflower.
Yeah.
And we joked about that, but at the same time, he's really proud because him and his wife bought a house, a farm, a small little farm out in Hollister. And he had to get the roof repaired. But he was like saying, hey, dude, next year I'm going to kick your ass at man camp. I was like, bring it on, dude. I could cook. I'm not probably good with desserts, but I could cook. And that was the last time I saw him. And then I had my accident, and my accident had to go through my own journey. And so when I got that text from my other mate, Kraut, he sent that text. It was just like, damn.
Yeah, like we were talking about before the interview, I got a similar text when my buddy Eric Myrtle was killed in a motorcycle collision. I was loading up the car before my shift, and I got the text from my B partner, and he was like, hey, Eric was involved in 1180, 1055.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck, man.
Yeah.
All right.
It sucked because it was one of those where he was a good dude.
Yeah.
He was a solid human being.
Yeah.
And he just got killed. Not just killed, he was killed.
Absolutely.
And it's like, holy shnikes, So yeah, it sucked.
So in December 2016, you make the decision that you're going to apply for medical retirement.
Yeah. That was a hard decision, and that was a decision based on just a lot of things. But one of the contributing things was Mikey's death, and then the fact that I wasn't all there. I mean, my brain, it had just been a little bit over a year, but my brain was not. I was still having mood swings, depression. Like I couldn't figure out things. I was easily overwhelmed by the most smallest thing, and something that I had always told myself in the career was, if I could not take care of myself, I would be a liability to other officers and a liability to the general public, to the citizens that I'm supposed to protect. So if I am in that position, then I need to self-select myself, remove myself from that world, And it was a hard decision. But my best mate, Viking, pretty much said, hey, dude, you've walked away from a lot of things. You were able to walk away from this. That's a sign you got to take a step back and do what's right for you, not what's right for the organization. So
on that note, let's go back to the letter. Reflecting back and throughout my career, someone, aka God, had always watched out for me. My mate said I should take it as a cue by walking away from the accident with only an MTBI as a sign for me to get out.
yeah.
Do you think he was right?
Oh yeah.
Do you think he made the right call in retrospect?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
At the time, it was.
Well, because you had hopes and aspirations. We talked about earlier when I set the foundation for this interview. This was a career.
Right.
You had aspirations. We
It's a
all
way of
do.
life.
We all do, right?
Yeah.
This was a path. You were on the path, right? You were thinking of, hey, I'd like to be part of different units. I'd like advanced training, maybe even promotion. I mean, all these things were part of your universe.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, this post-collision, you get a traumatic brain injury, and it's all fucking gone.
Yeah.
And now you realize that the handwriting is on the wall, and you're going to apply for a medical retirement, and that's where you're at.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you're granted that medical retirement.
Yeah. In August 2017, I was in New Zealand, living. One of my dreams was to be able to spend time in New Zealand and not be there for a short amount, for a couple weeks. And yeah.
So you get medically retired. Let's talk about the stigma. I've used that word a couple times during this interview. So there's a stigma in the civilian sector, right? When you talk about brain injuries and whatnot, there's definitely a stigma in law enforcement.
Yes.
People tend to be like, oh, that guy's fucking radioactive. I'm not talking to him, right? You and I both know, we were talking about, hey, realistically, peer support and employee assistance program and any kind of like issues you're going through, realistically, that's not a viable option. You're going to seek out a network for that. You're not going to stay within your own agency, most likely, right? So I want to go back to the letter, something you wrote. We're talking about stigma, and this is like a life stigma because now you are medically retired and moving forward. When you tell people
I'm trying to move
at
forward,
such a young age, right? Because when we think retirement, we think,
I was 40.
65 plus, right?
Yeah.
Now you're like, back then you're 40 and all of a sudden you're medically retired and people are like, well, you look fine. Like, what the fuck is the problem, right?
Yeah.
So let's go back to what you wrote here real quick. You told Marv, the word disable, along with disability, has so many negative connotations associated with it. I know I am not disabled, and I'm sure other people that are painted with the same broad brush share the same sentiment. So here you are, sort of doing some inner perspective right here. You're self-reflecting on, shit, I now have this moniker. Like this is now baggage that comes with Hugh.
Yeah.
I am now medically retired because I'm disabled, right? But you're really not, but yet you are. Hashtag dichotomy.
I know.
Right? So.
Hashtag good, period.
Yeah. So, ultimately, you have to come to grips with, for lack of a better term, embracing the suck, frankly, right? You start embracing the suck and you start to find your way in life and you start to realize that, okay, post law enforcement career, what the fuck am I going to do now?
Post TBI.
Yes.
You know, that's also another thing. It's post TBI. I don't view things the same way, and I don't take in things the same way either. My brain now, it takes me longer to read something, to comprehend something, to analyze something, to come up with a decision. Not only come up with a decision, but also that cognitive function to get to that decision. It's no longer a linear, easy, okay, we'll do this, we'll do that. It becomes, sometimes you double back and it goes nowhere. And that's what having a brain injury is like. It's on many levels. So it was rough. And for people to say, you know, yeah, you look fine. Another one that I always got was, who goes, oh, it must be nice to retire early. You must be a millionaire. You know, it's just because of the area where we live in. You know, I think I'm some .comer or some tech guy, but I'm not. I'm far from tech. I'm actually tech-tarded, so I am.
Well, I used to be a tech guy. I used to be a design engineer, and it's probably a good thing you're not in that. That's a whole nother animal. So let's continue on your journey here. So you're medically retired. You are self-judging because you're looking at it like, hey, I'm not fucking retired. I'm unemployed.
Yeah.
Like you're kind of looking at yourself like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah.
Like I'm like unemployed now, right?
Right.
And so there's a sort of self-judgment process, or almost like a negative connotation with yourself, to where you're looking at yourself like sort of a lower class person because of this situation that you're in. But then something good happens to you. You bump into someone that you knew when you were 19, and her name is Gina.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about Gina.
So Gina and I would describe it as serendipity. We went to the same elementary school. She was a couple of grades behind. I vaguely remember her. I think because like looking at the yearbook, but maybe I did. Maybe I had interactions with her or whatnot. But we got to know each other. I was 19. She was 18. Yeah. So her and her sister, her younger sister, and her cousin Caitlin and Maria went to take kickboxing because I taught kickboxing, and we got to know each other. I didn't think anything of it. I thought she was cute, you know, bubbly and whatnot. She really liked me. On several occasions, she asked me out, and I declined because
you're an idiot.
Because I'm an idiot. Yes, because I can hear my mom chipping away and telling me, "No girlfriend," and like
no girlfriend,
a tiger mom. And also, be honest, I didn't have a job. I had no money, you know. I'm still living at home. So what am I going to do? Anyways, I'm not going to go down that route.
So you hook up with Gina, right?
Yeah, I hook up with Gina.
You've known her since you guys were kids. You hook up with her.
I hook up with her. We get together.
Things are going good.
Yeah.
Until
she went to my 40th birthday.
Until she says something to you that kind of blows your mind. She utters some magic words.
Magic and scary word at the same time.
So she says, I love you.
Yeah.
And how did you handle that?
I freaked out.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved her. I mean, I still love her. Like I love all the gals that I was, you know, Marie, Gina. But at that time, I was still trying to figure out who the hell I am as a person. I had so many things, I had gone through so many things, and I didn't even comprehend the things that I went through. And for her to say, I love you, to me, that completely freaked me out that night. And she walked out of the house that night, and I was just like, whoa, this is intense. Because the last person that said I loved you was Marie, and then she later said that she never loved me, and
she would never contact you again.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, she's fulfilling that.
Yeah.
And she also said she was going to stop smoking, but
Oh well.
oh well. But yeah, so that freaked me out. And then things that I want to fulfill in my life, I was like, holy shit. Now I have a gal, now I have Gina who's in love with me, who has a 6-year-old daughter from her previous marriage. You know, how do I take care of her? How do I take care of her daughter? I don't have a job. And it was just, everything was just like compounding on top of me. And yeah.
So you start to circle the drain because you're kind of feeling like I fucking can't handle this shit. Like I'm not ready for this.
Yeah.
Like emotionally, I just can't deal with it.
And my brain is not functioning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still trying to figure out my brain. I'm still, the brain just wasn't functioning properly. Other things were functioning properly quite well, but the brain was not.
So you fucking dumped her. You broke up with her.
Yeah, in the most chicken shit way too. And yeah.
So here we have you, Hugh, a fucking train wreck after your TBI debacle. Yeah. You meet this girl that you've known when you were younger.
She lives down the street from my parents' house, by the way.
She lives down the street. I mean, this is like a sort
Her parents live down the street from
basically a fairy tale.
Yes,
right?
serendipity.
You hook up with her again, but this time from a romantic standpoint, and all of a sudden she gets serious, she gets invested in you.
Yeah.
You panic, you don't know how to process all of this.
I freak out.
You freak out and you pull the fucking ripcord, I'm done.
Yeah.
But you quickly realize that you made a mistake.
I did.
So you sort of take inventory and then you go right back to her. I'm sorry, no harm, no foul. You guys get back together. She takes you back even without you really asking. It just kind of happens. And then
a couple days
history
later,
repeats itself.
Yeah.
And you do pretty much the same thing as you did before.
But this time
you freak out.
Yeah.
Not good. You kick her to the curb.
I didn't kick her to the curb. I said, this is not going to work out. And she was crying on the phone. I think her daughter was in the car with her. And yeah, so that was my slow descent into hell. You know, good way to round off 2017.
So you realize, once again, I fucked up.
Yeah.
I probably made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can salvage this and maybe get her back, and maybe, you know, I still miss her, I still love her, I still think about her. So let's catch up with you talking to her in person at her house, right? Or her parents' house?
At her parents' house.
Her parents' house, which is close to your parents' house.
Yeah, down 30 yards.
Yeah.
From my house.
So you show up after dumping her a second time.
Yes.
You show up at her house, and this is what you wrote in your memoir to Marv. She said I had hurt her and broke up with her twice. She told me she had met someone. She was happy with him, already met his sons, and is going to see him. Is going to continue to see him.
Yeah.
My heart felt like it was ripped out, quartered, skewered, and dragged in 4 directions. I am sure she said a few more things that I blocked out. Professionals call it, quote, auditory exclusion, unquote. It was a momentary self-preservation shutdown. I was grasping and comprehending the words that impacted me, quote, met someone, unquote, quote, happy, unquote, and, quote, continue to see him, unquote. So you pretty much got rejected and realized that
in front of
you had given it up,
yeah.
Threw it away, and got passed on by, and there would be no third time with her.
No.
So I'm going to chalk this up and say this was self-inflicted. that you pretty much shot yourself in the foot with her. In hindsight, in retrospect, how did you feel when she told you that I will continue to see him?
I thought that was fast, but I think that's my...
Like, did you like honestly feel like I got a fucking shot? If I just go there, it'll be like last time.
Yeah.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah.
And then you got shot.
I got a haircut. I got her purple flowers. Yeah, you know. And
then she tells you, "Fuck no, I'm done."
And she looked lovely when she answered the door. I mean, she looked amazing, and and I was scared shitless, standing in front of that door, knocking on that door. And I've stood in front of doors before where I knew someone was armed, but I could tell you this time was completely different because...
So let's go back to the letter, because you described that pretty poetically here. We hugged and I excused myself. Time to rip off the Band-Aid. A heaping lot of humility was served cold to me that evening as I stood in front of Gina. I was in shock. I felt cold, numb, and alone. Less than 100 yards to the east was my parents' house, yet I felt alone and scared. Quote, "It's kind of hard to disarm a bomb after it's gone off. You can only pick up the pieces." That closes the chapter with you and Gina. You guys are done. How do you pick up the pieces from that, really? I mean, emotionally, that's a tough one, because you've known her for a long time. You've had success with her.
Yeah.
In retrospect, and we talked about this at Man Camp, in retrospect, you kind of realize that, man, I probably shouldn't have done that. Like, you know, the old saying, "It's me, not you," right?
Yeah.
But she had already moved on.
Yeah.
She had already said, you know, and quote, "I will continue to see him." So she had already met another guy. She was already kind of moved on. She'd been dumped twice by you. So she's like, you know, I don't have time for this shit. This is like bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay. So that ship sails. Your career ship sails. You're living with TBI, but you've learned to sort of manage it and operate within whatever parameters you need to, whether it's, you talked about decision making earlier and you know, going through your checklist. Talk to me a little bit about Windy Hill Stitch Works, and how did that come about, and when did that come about in your life?
So Windy Hill, so after, skip back, it's funny that the journey, speak briefly about this. So that was in December 2017. And dude, I was in a world of hurt after that. And I think that was one of the lowest points in my life emotionally. And I needed that because I needed to get checked. I had felt that I had kind of like my TBI sorted, like I survived having a traumatic brain injury. There was like a sense of cockiness, like physical cockiness. I'm like, dude, I can do this. You know, I'd kind of rebuilt my body. And I just felt like I was stronger, physically stronger. And when this came about, I got knocked down again. And it wasn't a physical knockdown. It was more or less, it was an emotional knockdown. And it was something that I didn't experience. I did a little bit with Marie when we broke up. But this was completely different because Gina was not like Marie. Gina actually cared about me, and
it seemed like
and
that
loved
was
me.
it's to me on the from an outside perspective. It seemed like that was like a healthier relationship.
Yeah, it
Like
very healthy.
Like she genuinely loved you.
Yeah.
And really cared for you.
And the family loved me doing family
it just
stuff.
seemed a lot healthier than Marie.
Yeah. So when that happened, and then she's saying, "Hey, I moved on," it was like, holy shnikes. It's like, got kicked in the crotch, and then kicked up in the head, and it was just like, crap, this sucks. So to kind of clean up, finish off the whole Gina post effect of that. So we never got back together. But it was a good thing for me because what happened was it was a good emotional reset for me. I had been a little bit cocky since my brain injury because I kind of like was able to somewhat manage my head injury. Self-treated myself with diet, exercise. So I was feeling good, but I don't think I was like emotionally squared away. So after that breakup, it was a good reset. And what I did was I got a plane ticket, went to London, became a nanny for a few weeks, and then went to enrolled in a fashion program over at West Valley College. So that was interesting, and that kind of helped me with my Windy Hill endeavor.
Fashion program.
Yeah.
Okay. So explain to the viewers what exactly Windy Hill is.
So Windy Hill is an actual physical location. It's a open space preserve located, I guess, along the peninsula. You could see it from the 280. And it's a place where my best mate and I would go rucking, and we would talk about equipment, military gear, law enforcement gear, because he was prior military, and he's also law enforcement. So he was a senior officer, and I looked up to him, squared away dude. And we would talk about equipment, what he learned from his military career, what he learned from his LE career. And Windy Hill was kind of was the basis, was the lab for us to kind of talk about if we were to make or design equipment, we would do this. So from there, I started making my own equipment, or I'd been modifying my equipment, but I would share it to him like, oh, I did this with this piece of kit, or he would tell me, oh, I did this with this piece of kit. So when we got together, we're like, hey, we should make stuff. So we were looking for a name, and Windy Hill, we came up with the name Windy Hill because that's where it started. And that was, we came up with the name Windy Hill, I think around 2010, but prior to that, we were trying to figure out what other names that we could think of, but the whole idea came out about 2004, 2005, when we were doing a lot of rucking up there.
Let's talk about like where you're at today. So in your spare time, because quote unquote you're retired.
I'm retired, yeah. Aside from shuffleboard, and bingo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we should play some bocce ball together.
Oh, my shoulder's not that strong though.
Okay. I'll hire someone to throw it for you.
Yes, there you go.
Okay. We'll keep people employed. COVID,
Yeah.
So you've got your sewing machine.
Yes.
You've got ideas.
Yes.
And you make stuff.
Yes.
You make stuff for basically tactical operations like law enforcement, military, that kind of stuff. I've seen like a chest rig that you did and some other stuff on Instagram and whatnot. So moving forward, how can people get in touch with you? How can they follow you? Why don't you give yourself a little plug here?
Okay. So I have two accounts. my everyday account, Real Life Human, is Human Lab. That's on Instagram. That's Human,
Okay.
HIEUMAN Lab, LAB. And then the Windy Hill is at WH Stitchworks.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Cool.
So that's how people can follow me.
All right. And they can follow me at SGT12XU, Sergeant12XU. Okay. I'll put links in the video description for those. Finally, I want to sort of put a bow on this whole thing in a positive way. So, you're not the first person to have TBI, and you're not the last.
Right.
But your journey is unique. It's very unique, which is why I have you here today. So my thought process was, a couple months ago, you and I talked about collaborating on some kind of, content creation thing, right? And this was your idea. So this is your platform. This is your podium today. What can you share, or what would your advice be to people that are now walking your path, like people that all of a sudden out of the blue, whether it's a military guy who hits an IED, or whether it's a law enforcement guy like you and I that bam gets TC'd somehow and they're in a collision and all of a sudden they're fucked up. Like, what would your advice be to that person when they are struggling physically and psychologically coming to grips with having a TBI?
Take a step back and take care of yourself. First thing is take care of yourself. Figure out what is causing. You can't stop the symptoms, or not. I wouldn't say the symptoms, but the effects of a TBI. But you can manage it, and that's something I had to make peace with. Was I had to learn to manage my TBI, and through management, that's through diet, sleep, exercise. Those are the three things that I found that contributed to my management of TBI. And the thing is that's not based on a physician. That's not based on anyone else except me. At the end of the day, that's on me. If my sleep is shit, then my mood is shit. And everything else is shit. Everyone around me starts to feel that shit. So it comes down to me. At the end of the day, it's my actions. And if I want to make that change, it has to be incumbent on me. And then, if they're being treated by a physician, talk to the physician and say, what is the big picture? Are they going to get vestibular therapy? Are they going to get vision therapy? Are they going to get go see a psychologist? Because every time the brain gets impacted, literally, by something results in a TBI, their mood changes. I can tell you that my mood now is not like what my mood was pre-TBI. If I have a shitty sleep cycle, all of a sudden, the next few days, I'm an emotional wreck, and I've had to learn that, hey, dude, that your sleep affects that. My diet also affects that, because that starts affecting if it's like a sugar, refined sugars, refined carbs, those
Alcohol
that will affect. I stopped drinking a couple years ago. And all those things, at the end of the day, the individual has that self-control. It's not an external thing.
So that's the big message is you are your own architect of your own future.
Yeah.
Right. And in looking at your story, Hugh, one thing is pretty clear to me, and that is if you can just fight through it a little bit and just hang on a little longer, and essentially I'm always kind of the guy that I don't really believe in luck.
Because luck goes both ways.
For me, luck is kind of opportunity meets preparedness kind of thing. But I also truly believe that strong-willed men make their own luck. And so, women too. But that's kind of where I'm at with it, is you made a conscious decision to manifest your own destiny. And that's the difference. You stopped being a victim and you started to look at it with an analytical approach as to how can I operate within this new paradigm that I'm in? And how do I sort of set new rules for myself that can set me up for success? And then this is all from within, right?
Right.
So sort of the big takeaway for me is like one of those Musashi quotes, and I'll probably have it on the trailer for this video, is everything is from within.
Yeah, it's internal.
You don't need to look outside. It's like you are fixing yourself from within to a degree. Like, you can't fix your injury. It is what it is.
Right.
But you can certainly adapt, improvise, and overcome.
Yes.
Like many before you have, and many will after. But I would just say that thanks for coming over, man, and thanks for spending time with me. You have a very unique story, a very perilous journey that you've been on, both with the injury and post-injury and everything. And I think somebody watching this video will probably benefit at some level, I hope.
Yeah, same here.
And that's something that we talked about earlier, was if just one person can watch this and find just a little bit of inspiration so they don't eat their gun and kill themselves, right? If they can just hang on a little bit longer, and just endure.
Right.
Endure. Like the old Josie Wales, endeavor to persevere, right?
And something else is, my best mate said to me, he said, when I was in a bad place, he said, there's a proverbial saying, it goes, how do you eat an elephant?
One fucking bite at a time, right?
Exactly. And that's how I view life now, is you do it one bite at a time.
And that's tough to get your head wrapped around when you're in the moment, suffering, and you truly are victimized.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to look outside of your situation and have that 40,000 foot view.
Right.
Because in a way, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like immediately post-collision, when you're in shock, you're in a macro view.
Right.
You are doing small tasks, but not seeing the big picture, right? So if you can get outside of that and start to develop yourself and rebuild yourself, and I think you've done a great job of rebuilding yourself, because, brother, you certainly hit some lows, but those days are gone.
Yeah.
They're over.
That's life. And you know what? Life goes on.
It is.
And like getting back to you about, that 40,000 foot elevation, I think there's like some Navy SEAL guy, Jack is the name or something like that. He says like you got to detach and prioritize and execute or something like that.
Yeah.
I think his name's Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you need to do that. And it's hard as an individual to recognize that and go, hey, dude, I need to step back and take the big picture and go, okay, what needs to be addressed, and address it. Just like, when you're shooting, you address the nearest threat and then you work down the line. So
sometimes when you're wrapped up in the moment, it's hard to see it.
Especially with when it's your
hard
brain.
to see it. And especially when your ability to reason through your critical thinking skills, the analytical side of things, might be negatively impacted by TBI.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about me. I mean, I'm blessed. I don't have quite the severity of impact that you did, but when I got into my collision, the next day I literally could not operate the coffee maker, right? I didn't know how to make coffee. I've been making coffee my entire life, my entire adult life. All of a sudden, the day after the collision, I don't know how to make coffee. How do we explain that? That's a problem, right? Fortunately, I was able to, recover and get well.
And you noted that too.
But that's not the case with everyone, and everyone's path is a little different. So your path definitely had some mines and some tripwires and some IEDs and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I'm very glad that you've got your shit together now, and you are a good example for those people that may be in a similar situation, whether it's military, law enforcement, or even civilians, that, hey man, just fucking hang in there. Yes, you're going to have some lows, but
will it suck? It'll suck.
Yeah. Just embrace the suck.
Yeah.
But then turn it around.
Yes.
And ultimately, you've got your creative side back. You're making cool gear with Windy Hill. Your head's screwed on straight. Your mindset is good. You're positive. You're focused. These are all things that you've come to grips with what happened to you.
Yeah.
And you're living with it.
Yeah.
And I think you are a very good example of someone who refuses to quit, and someone who is very flexible and adaptable, and someone has a very positive mindset and a good spirit. So once again, brother, thanks for being on episode 1.
Thank you.
Deep dive, and we'll run it back and do it again another time.
All right, dude. Maybe we'll do cooking or something like that.
All right.
Yeah.
We haven't even explored your cooking, and we haven't even explored New Zealand.
Yeah.
So maybe next time.
Yeah, you go on my Instagram, you can see that.
That's right.
Food and cooking. Yeah.
All right.
So.
And with that,
Thank you.
We're Oscar Mike.
All right.
All right.